The dusty rays of the afternoon sun barely pierced the grimy window of Sarah's small apartment, illuminating the motes dancing in the air, a silent ballet of forgotten particles. She sat hunched over a worn wooden table, a half-finished crossword puzzle lying before her like a surrender. Every day in this small American town felt like a faded photograph, its colors muted, its edges blurred by the relentless passage of time. Sarah, a young woman whose eyes held a depth beyond her years, carried the invisible weight of a past tragedy, a burden that tethered her to a life of quiet isolation. Her routines were a carefully constructed cage, designed to keep the world out and the gnawing ache within contained. Memories, however, were less easily managed. They flickered like old home movies in her mind, fragments of a time when laughter had been a constant melody in their home. A strong, reassuring hand guiding her first bicycle ride, the scent of her mother's freshly baked apple pie filling the kitchen, her father's booming voice reading bedtime stories, his eyes crinkling at the corners with mirth. The images were vivid, almost painfully so, a stark contrast to the hollow echo that now resided where a loving family once thrived. That vibrant tableau had shattered years ago, leaving behind only questions and a profound sense of loss. The central piece of that broken mosaic was her father, whose disappearance remained an open wound, a mystery whispered about in hushed tones, then quickly swept under the rug of collective amnesia. Sleep offered little respite, often ushering in the same recurring nightmare. A shadowy figure, a desperate plea, and a single indistinct word whispered on the edge of comprehension, just out of her grasp. She would wake with a gasp, the phantom echo of the word vibrating in her skull, leaving her heart pounding and her sheets tangled. Her mother, a woman whose once bright spirit had been dimmed by an unspoken sorrow, moved through their days like a ghost. Discussions about the past were a forbidden territory, met with a quiet despair that effectively sealed Sarah's lips. It was a silent pact of avoidance, yet it did nothing to quell Sarah's yearning for answers, for a sense of belonging that felt perpetually just out of reach. This particular evening unfolded like countless others, bathed in the soft, dying light of dusk. Sarah was stirring a cup of instant coffee, the mundane ritual a small anchor in her drifting existence. Outside, the streetlights began to hum to life, casting long, skeletal shadows. Inside, a single flickering fluorescent bulb above the kitchen counter provided the only illumination, casting a sickly yellow glow on the chipped paint. Then a sound, sharp and out of place, sliced through the evening's quietude. It was the insistent trill of an old landline phone, one that had sat dormant for years, a relic of a bygone era, its number long since forgotten by all but telemarketers. Sarah froze, her hand still clutching the coffee mug. Who could possibly be calling? The sound persisted, a jarring intrusion. Hesitantly, she walked towards the ancient device, its beige plastic yellowed with age. She picked up the receiver, a faint static crackling in her ear. "Hello?" she ventured, her voice barely a whisper. A raspy, distorted voice responded, sounding as if it were struggling to push through a thick fog. The words were garbled, almost unintelligible, creating a knot of unease in her stomach. She strained to hear, her brow furrowed in concentration. The voice seemed to be trying to convey something urgent, something desperate. Then, abruptly, the sounds ceased. A chilling, absolute silence descended upon the line, more profound than any she had ever experienced. Just as she was about to hang up, thinking it a prank or a wrong number, a single, barely audible word drifted through the dead air, a whisper from the void before the line went completely dead. Phoenix. The single whispered word, Phoenix, hung in the air, a phantom presence long after the line went dead. Sarah stood motionless, the receiver still pressed to her ear, the silence now deafening, amplifying the frantic beat of her own heart. A cold dread snaked its way through her veins, chilling her to the bone. Who was that? What did they want? And why that word? Her mind raced, dissecting the brief, terrifying exchange. The voice had been undeniably human, yet so distorted, so broken, it had barely registered as such. It sounded like someone struggling for their last breath, or perhaps someone speaking from a place beyond the living. She slowly placed the receiver back in its cradle, her hand trembling. The old phone, a forgotten relic, now felt like a conduit to something dark and unfathomable. Her first instinct was to trace the call, to find out who had uttered that cryptic word. She fumbled for her smartphone, her fingers clumsy with shock, and dialed the number for the phone company. The automated voice on the other end was frustratingly unhelpful, stating that anonymous calls from landlines were untraceable, especially after the fact. Each attempt to get through to a human operator met with a polite but firm refusal, a digital wall of bureaucracy that only deepened her sense of powerlessness and growing unease. The word Phoenix began to echo in her mind, a persistent nagging whisper. It stirred a vague, half-formed memory, a fleeting image she couldn't quite grasp. Something about her father, perhaps, a story he used to tell, or a nickname. The more she tried to pin it down, the more elusive it became, like smoke slipping through her fingers. Later that evening, her mother returned, her usual quiet demeanor replaced by an unsettling agitation when Sarah, still reeling from the call, recounted the bizarre incident. "The landline rang," Sarah began, her voice still a little shaky, "and someone said Phoenix before hanging up." Her mother's eyes, usually clouded with a resigned sadness, suddenly flared with a terrifying intensity Sarah had rarely witnessed. A flush crept up her neck and her hands clenched at her sides. "You shouldn't have answered it, Sarah," her mother snapped, her voice surprisingly sharp, laced with a fear that transcended mere annoyance. "Some things are best left undisturbed." "But who was it, Mom, and what does Phoenix mean?" Sarah pressed, sensing a hidden truth lurking beneath her mother's outburst. Her mother turned away, her shoulders rigid. "It means nothing. It was probably a prank call, a wrong number, just forget about it." But her voice lacked conviction, and her gaze darted nervously around the room, as if expecting something to materialize from the shadows. "No, Mom, it wasn't a prank. It sounded desperate, and that word, it felt important." Sarah insisted, her own frustration mounting. "You know something, don't you? This has something to do with Dad, doesn't it?" The air crackled with unspoken tension. Her mother finally whirled around, her face etched with a pain so profound it silenced Sarah instantly. "You always push, don't you? Always digging, always wanting to know," she cried, her voice cracking. "Some things are buried for a reason. Sarah, to protect you." The argument escalated, a torrent of long-suppressed emotions finally breaking free. Amidst the heated exchange, Sarah's mother let slip fragmented phrases about her father's secret life, his dangerous obsessions, and her own desperate attempts to keep Sarah safe from the truth. But before Sarah could extract more, her mother retreated, collapsing onto the sofa, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. Confused and deeply troubled, Sarah left her mother and went to her own room, her mind a whirlwind of questions. The anger and fear in her mother's eyes were too real to ignore. She began to search her father's old belongings, things her mother had carefully packed away years ago, never to be touched. In a dusty box at the back of his closet, beneath a stack of old blueprints and technical manuals, she found it. A small, tarnished silver locket. It was intricately carved, and when she pried it open, a faded inscription was barely visible. "To my Phoenix." Inside, nestled securely, was a miniature photograph of her father, his smile warm and familiar, yet tinged with a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher. A wave of emotion washed over her, a mixture of grief and a burgeoning sense of revelation. This was it, the connection she had been searching for. She returned to her mother, the locket clutched tight in her hand. Seeing the locket, her mother finally broke, tears streaming down her face as she confessed, in halting whispers, about her father's clandestine activities, his fervent belief in some hidden truth, and her own desperate attempts to shield Sarah from the dangerous world he had inhabited. Her mother then led her to her father's old study, a room that had remained untouched, a shrine to a life cut short. Beneath a loose floorboard, concealed beneath a worn rug, was a small wooden box. Inside, Sarah found a cryptic map, hand-drawn and filled with unfamiliar symbols and annotations. It pointed to a remote, abandoned lodge nestled deep in the mountains, a place her father had often spoken of as his sanctuary. Despite her mother's tearful pleas and frantic warnings, a fierce determination ignited within Sarah. This was her father's last breadcrumb, a path leading to the truth he had died trying to uncover. She would follow it. As she prepared for the journey, a chilling sensation crept over her, the distinct feeling of being watched, a growing unease that whispered of unseen eyes and looming danger. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. Sarah embarked on her solitary journey. The old pickup truck, groaning under the strain of the treacherous mountain roads. Each hairpin turn felt like a reflection of her internal struggle, a winding path through uncertainty and fear, yet propelled by an unyielding resolve. The vehicle's tires crunched over loose gravel, kicking up dust plumes that momentarily obscured the dense pine forests bordering the narrow track. Memories of her father, a man whose laughter had once filled these very mountains during their countless hiking trips, now flooded her mind. He had loved the raw, untamed beauty of the outdoors, finding solace and inspiration in its wild embrace. This was his world, and now it was her quest. As the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape, Sarah finally spotted it, a dilapidated skeletal structure, barely visible through the gnarled branches of ancient trees. The lodge stood like a forgotten sentinel, its weathered timber facade and broken windows gazing out with vacant eyes. A profound sense of desolation hung heavy in the air, yet beneath it a subtle hum of something else, something unsettling. Approaching cautiously, Sarah noticed inconsistencies that immediately put her on edge. The overgrown path leading to the entrance, while wild, showed faint impressions of tire tracks, too recent to be from decades past. A padlock on the main door, though rusted, looked conspicuously new. The dust on the porch, thick in some places, had been disturbed in others, suggesting recent activity. This was no mere abandoned ruin. Someone had been here, and perhaps someone still was. Pushing open the creaking door, Sarah stepped into a cavernous, dust-filled interior. The air was cold and stale, but an almost imperceptible scent of wood smoke lingered, a ghost of warmth in the pervasive chill. Her flashlight beam danced across cobweb-draped furniture and the skeletal remains of what was once a grand stone fireplace. It was here, in the hearth, that her father's map had indicated a hidden compartment. With renewed urgency, she ran her hands along the rough stones, feeling for any anomaly. Her fingers brushed against a loose brick, tucked away behind a sooty ledge. With a grunt, she pried it free, revealing a small dark recess. Inside, nestled amongst layers of dust and debris, lay a leather-bound journal and a single yellowed newspaper clipping. Her heart pounded as she retrieved them, the weight of her father's secrets now tangible in her hands. The journal, its pages brittle with age, was filled with her father's familiar, precise handwriting. It began not with personal anecdotes, but with detailed, meticulous notes on a powerful, shadowy entity, EtherCorp. The entries spoke of corporate malfeasance, unethical experiments, and a deep-seated corruption that reached into the highest echelons of power. He had been researching them, meticulously documenting their activities, convinced they were responsible for something far more sinister than mere corporate greed. The newspaper clipping, dated just weeks before his disappearance, was equally chilling. Its headline screamed, "Mysterious fire engulfs EtherCorp Research Lab, cause unknown." The article detailed the complete destruction of a remote EtherCorp facility, with no survivors and an official explanation of accidental equipment malfunction. Sarah's blood ran cold. The pieces were beginning to fit, forming a terrifying mosaic of her father's final days. He hadn't just disappeared. He had been investigating something truly dangerous, something that had evidently led to his demise. EtherCorp. The name resonated with a sinister echo in the silent lodge. A sudden, sharp snap of a twig outside shattered the oppressive quiet. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. The sound was too close, too deliberate to be an animal. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. Someone was out there watching her. The game, as her mother had warned, had indeed just begun, and Sarah was now undeniably a player, trapped in the mountain's chilling shadow. The sharp snap outside sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through Sarah. Her mind, racing from the journal's revelations, instantly switched to survival mode. She instinctively extinguished her flashlight, plunging the lodge into near-total darkness, save for the faint sliver of moonlight filtering through a grimy window. Pressing herself against the rough stone of the fireplace, She strained her ears, every nerve-ending alert. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sound itself, a pregnant pause that spoke of lurking danger. She held her breath, listening for any rustle, any footstep, any indication of movement. Minutes stretched into an eternity, her heart a frantic bird trapped in her chest. Finally, a distant, almost imperceptible crunch of gravel suggested the presence had moved away, or perhaps was merely circling. Sarah waited a few more agonizing moments before daring to move, her escape a silent, desperate crawl towards the back exit, her father's journal clutched tightly in her hand. She slipped out into the cold mountain air, melting into the shadows of the surrounding trees, her car a distant, hopeful beacon. Once safely inside her vehicle, the engine roaring to life, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe, though the fear still gnawed at her. The encounter confirmed her worst suspicions. She was no longer just an investigator. She was a target. With trembling hands, she switched on the interior light and returned to her father's journal, needing more answers, needing to understand the full scope of his dangerous quest. The entries became more frantic, more personal, detailing not just EtherCorp's illicit activities, human trials disguised as medical breakthroughs, environmental destruction veiled as scientific progress, but also her father's growing terror for his family. He had discovered that EtherCorp was experimenting with a highly unstable bioagent, capable of widespread devastation, and they were willing to silence anyone who stood in their way. His meticulous notes painted a picture of a man consumed by a moral imperative, driven to expose the truth, yet increasingly isolated. He wrote of a trusted colleague, a man named Marcus, who had initially been his confidant, sharing his outrage and his resolve. But then Marcus had vanished abruptly and without a trace. Her father's later entries speculated wildly, a desperate mind trying to piece together a betrayal. He suspected Marcus had been turned, either coerced or corrupted, becoming an informant for EtherCorp. The thought sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Her father hadn't just gone missing. He had been actively silenced, and perhaps by someone he once considered a friend. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her father wasn't just a victim of circumstance, he was a casualty of a calculated, ruthless conspiracy. As she delved deeper into the journal, her fingers tracing the faded ink, she found it. Tucked within a seemingly innocuous diagram of a molecular structure, a series of seemingly random letters and numbers. A coded message. Her father, ever the strategist, had anticipated this. He had hidden a contingency, a path forward should he fail. Hours later, with the aid of an old cryptography book she'd found among his belongings back home, Sarah painstakingly deciphered the message. It revealed a location, a specific address for a safe deposit box in a bank in a city several hours away. The clarity of the instructions, the precision of the code, spoke volumes about her father's determination, even in his darkest hours. A fierce resolve began to burn within her, eclipsing the fear. It was a potent mix of vengeance for her father and a desperate need for justice. She would follow every lead, expose every secret, no matter the cost. But a creeping dread remained. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was now a constant companion, a shadow clinging to her every move. The mountain had revealed its secrets, but it had also marked her. She was now irrevocably entangled in her father's dangerous legacy, and the true hunt had only just begun. The journey to the city felt like an endless gauntlet, each mile pushing Sarah further into the heart of the danger. Every rear-view mirror glance, every shadow that darted across her peripheral vision sent a jolt of paranoia through her. She drove with a heightened sense of awareness, her senses finely tuned to any anomaly, any sign that she was being followed. The city, a sprawling labyrinth of concrete and glass, offered a different kind of anonymity than the mountains, but also a different kind of threat. Here, danger could lurk in plain sight, a face in the crowd, a car blending seamlessly with traffic. Upon arriving at the bank, a fortress of steel and marble, Sarah presented the deciphered instructions and her father's identification. The process was agonizingly slow, each ticking second amplifying her anxiety. Finally, a stern-faced clerk led her to a private viewing room, placing a heavy, nondescript metal box on the polished table. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she fumbled with the key, her hands trembling slightly. Inside, nestled amongst layers of protective foam, lay two items. A sleek, metallic data drive, surprisingly small yet undoubtedly holding immense power, and a thick sealed envelope addressed to her. The letter, penned in her father's familiar hand, was a testament to his foresight and his enduring love. His words, though written years ago, spoke to her across time, a final poignant conversation. He detailed his audacious plan to expose EtherCorp, a meticulously crafted strategy designed to bypass their security and bring their heinous acts into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The Phoenix message, he explained, was indeed a code, a trigger for this contingency plan. It was meant to reach her, his resilient daughter, if all else failed. He wrote of his deep regret for the burden he was placing upon her, but also of his unwavering belief in her strength and intelligence. Then, with a heavy heart, he confirmed her darkest suspicions about Marcus. The man he had once trusted implicitly, the colleague who had shared his moral outrage, had indeed betrayed him. Marcus, driven by a combination of fear for his own life and a lucrative offer from EtherCorp, had turned informant. Leaking her father's movements and discoveries, the betrayal had cut him deeply, a wound more painful than any physical threat. Her father had suspected as much, but the confirmation in his own words solidified the chilling reality. The data drive, he explained, contained everything: encrypted files, detailed financial records, damning testimonies from former EtherCorp employees, and irrefutable scientific data proving the catastrophic dangers of their experiments. It was the definitive proof, the smoking gun, that would dismantle EtherCorp's empire. His letter concluded with a plea to ensure this information reached the right hands, to finish what he had started, to be his Phoenix. Just as Sarah was absorbing the weight of this revelation, a shadow fell across the viewing room door. She looked up, her blood running cold. Standing there, a sneer twisting his lips, was Marcus, his eyes, devoid of any warmth, fixed on the data drive in her hand. "So, the little bird found her father's nest," he purred, his voice laced with menace. "Hand it over, Sarah. This doesn't concern you." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of defiant anger. This was the man who had betrayed her father, who was complicit in his death. She clutched the data drive tighter, her knuckles white. "It concerns me more than you could ever imagine, Marcus," she retorted, her voice shaking but firm. With a sudden predatory lunge, Marcus sprang forward, his hand outstretched, aiming for the drive. Sarah reacted instinctively, shoving the table between them, sending the heavy metal box clattering to the floor. The viewing room, once a sanctuary of information, transformed into a battleground. Marcus, surprisingly agile for his bulk, sidestepped the table and grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. She struggled, twisting and kicking, fueled by a potent mix of adrenaline and righteous fury. He was stronger, but she was desperate. In a desperate move, she slammed her free hand onto his wrist, digging her nails in, and simultaneously brought her knee up with all her might. The unexpected blow caught him off guard, and his grip momentarily loosened. With a primal scream, Sarah yanked her arm free, scrambling backward, the data drive still clutched tightly in her hand. She burst through the viewing room door, ignoring the startled glances of bank employees, and sprinted towards the main exit. Marcus, recovering quickly, was right behind her, his heavy footsteps echoing through the grand hall. She could hear his enraged shouts, his threats, but she didn't look back. She knew, with chilling certainty, that he wouldn't stop until he had that drive. She had escaped, for now, but the chase had truly begun, and Marcus now knew she possessed the key to EtherCorp's downfall. The city streets blurred into a frantic kaleidoscope as Sarah weaved through the throngs of unsuspecting pedestrians, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus's enraged shouts still echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder that her brief escape was merely a reprieve. She was no longer just an investigator. She was a target, the hunted, with the weight of her father's legacy and EtherCorp's damning secrets clutched in her trembling hand. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat, every passing car a potential pursuer. Her mind raced, sifting through options, discarding them as quickly as they appeared. There was only one person she could think of, a name whispered in her father's journal as a man of integrity, a staunch adversary of corporate malfeasance, David, the retired journalist. She found David's address scrawled on a faded business card tucked inside the journal's cover, a relic from a time before her father's disappearance. His small, cluttered apartment, nestled above a dusty bookstore, smelled of old paper and lukewarm coffee. When she knocked, a gruff voice answered, and a man with tired eyes and a shock of white hair peered out. David was initially skeptical, his expression a mixture of caution and world-weariness. He'd seen too many wild goose chases, too many hopeful leads evaporate into thin air. But as Sarah, breathless and still trembling, recounted her story, the urgency in her voice, the raw conviction in her eyes, slowly chipped away at his cynicism. When she finally produced the data drive, explaining its contents and the meticulous details her father had painstakingly gathered, a spark ignited in his gaze. "EtherCorp," he muttered, his voice laced with a familiar bitterness. "I tried to expose them years ago. They shut me down, silenced my sources, smeared my name. They have tendrils everywhere." His words resonated with a deep understanding, a shared history of battling an unseen, powerful enemy. Sarah felt a fragile sense of hope bloom within her. She wasn't alone anymore. Together, they spent hours poring over the data, David's journalistic instincts kicking in, meticulously cross-referencing, verifying, and piecing together the final, devastating narrative. The evidence was overwhelming, a meticulously documented chronicle of EtherCorp's illicit human trials, environmental devastation, and political manipulation. Their plan began to take shape, a high-stakes, public broadcast. David still had contacts, old friends in the media who, though wary, possessed a deep-seated commitment to the truth. The idea was audacious, dangerous, but it was the only way to ensure the information couldn't be buried again. They would expose EtherCorp on a platform too large to ignore, too public to silence. As they worked, a palpable tension permeated the small apartment. The windows were kept shuttered, the curtains drawn, a silent acknowledgement of the danger that lurked outside. Sarah found herself constantly glancing at the door, every distant siren sending a jolt of fear through her. Their fears were not unfounded. Marcus, infuriated by Sarah's escape, had mobilized EtherCorp's formidable resources. He knew the data drive was out there, and he knew Sarah was the one holding it. Surveillance teams scoured the city, tracing her last known movements, closing in. A frantic call from one of David's old contacts confirmed their worst fears. EtherCorp agents were on the move, converging on their location. "They're coming for us," David whispered, his face grim. There was no time to lose. They grabbed the data drive, a small, unassuming device that held the power to bring down an empire, and scrambled out of the apartment, David leading the way through a maze of back alleys and forgotten side streets. The chase was thrilling, a desperate dash for survival. They heard the distant wail of sirens, the screech of tires, the shouts of men closing in. Sarah, fueled by a renewed surge of adrenaline, pushed herself harder than she ever thought possible. She felt a profound shift within her, the lingering fear giving way to a fierce, unyielding resolve. Her father had sacrificed everything for this truth, and she would not let his efforts be in vain. This was no longer just about vengeance. It was about justice, about protecting innocent lives, about honoring the memory of the man who had whispered Phoenix. The stakes were higher than ever, for her family's safety, for the world, rested on her success. The frantic escape had left Sarah and David winded, but alive. They had managed to shake off their pursuers, at least temporarily, finding refuge in a discreet, anonymous studio David had secured years ago for emergency broadcasts. It was old, dusty, but functional, a relic of a time when independent journalism still held sway. The air crackled with a nervous energy as they prepared for the broadcast, the culmination of Sarah's perilous journey and her father's ultimate sacrifice. David, a seasoned professional, moved with a practiced efficiency, setting up the cameras, checking the audio levels, and ensuring the connection to the underground network of independent news outlets was secure. Sarah, meanwhile, clutched the data drive, its cool metal a stark contrast to the burning intensity in her chest. EtherCorp, however, was not idle. The company, a behemoth with seemingly limitless resources, had mobilized its entire network. Their digital footprint was being scrubbed, their financial assets moved, their political allies leaned upon. Marcus, driven by a desperate need to cover his tracks and regain his standing, led the charge, his desperation fueling his relentless pursuit. He knew this broadcast was their last chance to silence the truth. Just as David was about to give the signal, the studio's ancient door burst open, revealing Marcus flanked by two burly EtherCorp operatives. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Sarah, then the data drive in her hand. "Give it to me, Sarah," he commanded, his voice devoid of its usual deceptive charm, raw with urgency. "Don't be a fool. You can't win this. EtherCorp will crush you." Sarah's grip tightened on the drive. "You're wrong, Marcus," she retorted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My father already won. The truth always finds a way," Marcus scoffed, advancing slowly. "Your father was a deluded idealist. He thought he could change the world. Look where it got him." He motioned to his men, who began to close in. "Now, hand it over, or this ends very badly for you and your journalist friend." A tense standoff ensued. Sarah's mind raced, recalling her father's meticulous planning, his contingency strategies, even his obscure notes about digital dead drops and timed releases. He had always anticipated betrayal, always prepared for the worst. She remembered a specific sequence, a series of seemingly random keystrokes he had taught her, a fail-safe in case the physical drive was compromised. As Marcus lunged, Sarah, with a burst of unexpected agility, sidestepped him, her fingers flying across the laptop keyboard David had prepared. In a blur, she executed the sequence, a complex, multi-layered command that activated the timed release her father had built into the data. The data drive, still in her hand, was now merely a decoy. The real information was already streaming, encrypted and fragmented across the independent network, scheduled to reassemble and broadcast in moments. Marcus, enraged, tackled her, but it was too late. A green light flashed on the laptop screen, followed by a series of rapidly scrolling lines of code. David, understanding instantly, grinned, a triumphant roar escaping his lips. "It's out! It's gone viral!" Chaos erupted. The EtherCorp operatives, realizing their failure, tried to destroy the equipment, but David, with surprising ferocity, fended them off. On screens across the globe, the carefully curated evidence, the damning reports, the irrefutable proof of EtherCorp's heinous crimes began to broadcast. The world watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded. Public outrage was immediate and overwhelming. Stock markets plummeted, news anchors stammered, and politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the disgraced corporation. Legal actions were initiated within hours. Marcus, stunned and defeated, was quickly apprehended by authorities who had been alerted by David's network. His betrayal, his greed, and his role in EtherCorp's atrocities were laid bare for all to see. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, a powerful vindication for her father. Yet it was mingled with a profound sense of loss. The fight was over, the truth revealed, but the gaping hole her father's absence left remained. Still, the world now knew. Her father's name, once shrouded in mystery and suspicion, was now synonymous with courage and integrity. The phoenix had roared and its cry echoed across the globe. The fallout from EtherCorp's exposure was nothing short of cataclysmic. Executives faced immediate arrest, their lavish offices ransacked by federal investigators, their carefully constructed empire crumbling into dust. The public, reeling from the sheer audacity of the corporation's hidden atrocities, demanded justice, their collective voice a deafening roar that swept through the news cycles and political corridors. Sarah watched it all unfold with a quiet intensity, a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness swirling within her. The battle had been won, but the war within her heart, the one waged against grief and uncertainty, was still being fought. Her mother, once a shadow of her former self, seemed to find a fragile peace in the aftermath. The truth, though painful, had finally set her free from the torment of not knowing, from the shame she had silently carried about her husband's supposed failure. She now understood the immense sacrifice he had made, the dangerous path he had walked to protect them, and a quiet pride began to replace the despair in her eyes. She often sat with Sarah, holding her hand, sharing stories of her father, not as a ghost of the past, but as the hero he truly was. Sarah, in turn, found herself reflecting on the arduous journey she had undertaken. The fear, the danger, the moments of utter despair all had forged something new within her. She was no longer the isolated, haunted young woman she had been. She was stronger, more resilient, capable of facing the darkest truths and emerging with her spirit intact. The pain of her loss remained, a constant ache, but it was now tempered by the fierce strength she had discovered within herself. One crisp autumn afternoon, Sarah visited her father's grave. The headstone, once a stark reminder of an unresolved mystery, now felt different. She placed a single white rose on the cool marble, a silent tribute to his courage. There was a sense of closure, a quiet understanding that settled over her, like the gentle breeze rustling through the leaves. The questions that had plagued her for years had finally been answered, and with those answers came a profound peace. The small community, once a place of quiet anonymity, rallied around her. Neighbors who had previously offered only sympathetic glances now approached with admiration, recognizing her bravery, her unwavering pursuit of justice. She found herself drawn into conversations, her voice, once timid, now resonating with conviction as she shared her story, not for personal gain, but to ensure that such injustices would never again be allowed to fester in the shadows. A new purpose began to emerge for Sarah. She realized her experience had given her a unique perspective, a powerful voice that could advocate for others. She started working with David, the journalist who had become a steadfast ally, on a foundation dedicated to whistleblowers and victims of corporate malfeasance. She used her platform to speak out against corruption, to champion transparency, and to empower those who felt silenced and helpless. One evening, as she worked late in her new office, a framed photograph of her father sat on her desk. She picked it up, tracing the familiar lines of his smile. In a final, symbolic act of remembrance, she installed a small, intricately carved wooden phoenix on the wall above her desk. It was a constant reminder of his spirit, his enduring legacy. The phoenix had indeed risen, not just for her father, but for a new beginning, a new era of accountability. The whisper from the caller, once a source of dread and confusion, had transformed into a powerful beacon of hope, a catalyst for truth and change. Sarah looked towards the future, her gaze clear and resolute. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but she was no longer alone, and she carried with her the enduring legacy of her father's fight for truth, a fight that had ultimately reshaped her world, and perhaps the world at large.